I will be reading from Exodus 20, verses 2 and 3. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me.
Thank you, Spencer. Good morning. It's good to have you with us this morning. The elders, the deacons, the staff have spent this weekend at our annual retreat at Miller Ranch. Had a great time. I thought the sessions were very well done, and I learned a lot and talked a lot about the vision for Oldham Lane going forward, not just this year, but in years to come. And it's very exciting. And our theme this year kind of focused on team building, something that we have been talking about on Sunday mornings. How can we be the best team possible for our Lord? And one of those aspects of being a strong team has got to be loyalty. You've got to be devoted to God. You've got to be devoted to the head, which is Jesus Christ, and then devoted to one another. Loyalty is extremely important. And I think most of us here, if not all of us, understand something about loyalty because we are loyal to so many things in our lives, right? We may be loyal to our spouse. We may have fierce loyalty to our job. We have fierce loyalty sometimes to the university that we attended or a sports team that is our favorite. And sometimes that loyalty can manifest itself in ways that are unhealthy. Sometimes we are so fiercely loyal to something that we act out of character. How many of you know who Harvey Updike is? Harvey Updike is a 62-year-old man that has a daughter named Crimson and a son named Bear, because he is an avid University of Alabama fan. He is the man who poisoned the oak trees at Toomer's Corner in Auburn, Alabama. Now, I'm not real sure where those oak trees stand in the lore of Auburn football or Auburn athletics, but they have a rich history. He poisoned them and now faces 1 to 10 years in prison for doing so. He called into a local sports radio talk show and admitted to doing the deed. And his reason for doing so, roll tide, he said. His loyalty to his university and to the football team that he loves. We have loyalty to all sorts of things. When I was a youth minister, I had 14 seventh-grade girls that were fiercely loyal to their best friend, so much so that they felt like they couldn't have another best friend. And so when that one best friend started dividing their time with someone else in the group, they got very jealous and very angry. Loyalty can cause us to do some outrageous things at times. Case in point, what Paul wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, beginning in verse 23. In far more labors, in far more imprisonments, beaten times without number, often in danger of death. 5 times I received from the Jews 39 lashes. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I've spent in the deep. I've been on frequent journeys, in dangers from rivers, dangers from robbers, dangers from my countrymen, dangers from the Gentiles, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, dangers at sea, dangers among false brethren. I have been in labor and hardship, through many sleepless nights, in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. Apart from such external things, there is the daily pressure on me of concern for all the churches. Loyalty, fierce loyalty, can make us do some pretty outrageous things and can make us endure some pretty outrageous things. Fierce loyalty to what matters most can cause us to maybe leave our homeland on a pilgrimage of faith with only a promise from God. Fierce loyalty may even move us to sacrifice our only son on an altar because God told us to. Fierce loyalty may cause one to take up a cross and then be nailed to that very cross. Yes, loyalty can cause us to do some pretty outrageous things. I want to read to you a letter written by a young man who was a communist. And he wrote this letter to his girlfriend. You see, he was breaking up with her because of his allegiance or his loyalty to communism. He says, "We communists have a high casualty rate. We are the ones who get shot and hung and ridiculed and fired from our jobs. and in every other way made as uncomfortable as possible. A certain percentage of us get killed or imprisoned. We live in virtual poverty. We turn back to the party every penny that we make above what is absolutely necessary to live on. We communists do not have time for the money for the many movies or concerts or T-bone steaks or decent homes or new cars. We've been described as fanatics. We are fanatics. Our lives are dominated by one great overshadowing factor, the struggle for world communism. We have a philosophy of life which no amount of money could buy. We have a cause to fight for, a definite purpose in life. We subordinate our petty personal selves into a greater movement of humanity, and if our personal lives seem hard or our egos appear to suffer through subordination to the party, then we are adequately compensated by the thought that each of us, in his small way, is contributing something new and true for the betterment of mankind. There is one thing in which I am dead earnest about, and that is the communist cause. It is my life, my business, my religion, my hobby, my sweetheart, my wife, my mistress, my bread, and my meat. I work at it in the daytime. I dream about it at night. Its hold on me grows, not lessens, as time goes on. Therefore, I cannot carry on a friendship, a love affair, or even a conversation without relating to it. This force which both drives and guides my life. I evaluate people, looks, ideas, and actions according to how they affect the communist cause and by their attitude toward it. I've already been in jail because of my ideals, and if necessary, I'm ready to go before the firing squad. Loyalty will make us do some pretty outrageous things and believe in some pretty outrageous things, right? But what if, and you know where I'm going with this, what if this man's words applied to Christianity? What if his words applied to the cause of Christ? Now, many would say he's still hopelessly out of sorts and outrageous and acting abnormal. But what if our dedication was so fierce and so loyal that it's all we talked about during the day, all we lived for, and all we dreamed about at night, that it was our food, that we had a hunger and thirst for righteousness that was so deep that it affected everything that we did? Are we fiercely loyal? You know, in the sports world, we see fans who are extremely dedicated to their team. We've talked about this before. People will wear the jersey of their favorite player. They'll paint their faces. They'll do whatever in order to support their team. And they act in some pretty outrageous ways at times. I was talking to somebody the other day about their favorite team, and they said, yeah, you know, we should be pretty good. We got a chance to win the championship this year. And I thought, who's this we stuff? You don't play for them. I mean, where does that... You're not out there practicing. You're not out there putting in the time and the effort to be... This is not a we thing. It's them, right? But that's how we think. We include ourselves as part of the team. If you go to Texas A&M to a ball game, you'll see on their stadium at Kyle Field, you'll see this sign that says, Home of the 12th Man. Texas A&M considers the fans as the 12th man. You got 11 players on the football field. Well, the 12th man is the people in the stands, the people cheering wildly and encouraging their team. At least Texas A&M recognizes that their fans have a stock or a stake in how their team does. And to some respect, they're right. I mean, there's a reason why we have home court or home field advantage in sports. But sometimes that loyalty can cause people to act in some pretty outrageous ways. It can cause them to do some pretty outlandish things. And that fierce loyalty to a football team or a basketball team or whatever sports team it is can cause one to maybe even act out of character at times. But you know as well as I do that as much as fans can be an encouragement, they can also be a hindrance as well. I know as a former coach, fans can be really supportive, and they can be some of your worst enemies. You see, we have a name for folks who are fans, who are all in when things are going good, but they quickly jump off the bandwagon when things aren't so good. What do we call them? Fair weather fans, right? As soon as their favorite player or their favorite team is doing something great, they can't wait to cheer and to tell everyone about it. But as soon as their favorite player fumbles the ball or makes a mistake, as soon as their team loses a game they should have won, they're quickly off the bandwagon. They're quick to criticize and play armchair quarterback because they are fair weather fans. They are only in when things are going well. And nowhere is this more devastating and more tragic than when it's within the church. And we even see it within the Lord's church. People who are all in when things are going well, when the church is growing, when things are alive and fresh and new, but people who bow out quickly when something's not right. People who constantly want to criticize the team. They want to stand back on the sidelines or sit in the stands and constantly criticize and critique what's going on. And isn't it the case most often that the people who criticize the most are the ones who are willing to do the least? You see, in the realm of sports, the fans sit in the stands and they either cheer or they boo. In the church, you're not allowed to sit in the stands. You've got to be in the game. In football or basketball, they won't allow the fans to come out onto the court and play. But in the church, you are not to be relegated to the sidelines. You are not to simply sit in the stands, or for the case of our illustration, in the pews. You are to be involved. You cannot sit back and play armchair quarterback. You must be a part of the solution. As Christians, we all must roll up our sleeves and go to work and get involved. There are many fair weather fans that we read about in the Bible, but I want to focus on John chapter 6. You can turn there if you'd like. In John chapter 6, we see a crowd of fair weather fans following Jesus. He had quite a multitude that were following after him. Now, in our culture, if Jesus were a preacher in the modern day, he might be very proud of this. He may think to himself, well, what a great thing. Look at all these people that are following after me. And it might cause him to get puffed up, but Jesus never cared about how big the crowd was. He was more concerned about having true followers. And here in John chapter 6, he tells the people, this crowd, this multitude that's following him, he tells them, in essence, I'm not going to feed you anymore. Because that was the only intent they had. They weren't following because they wanted to be true disciples. Remember, he had just come off of feeding the 5,000 in miraculous fashion. Now they were following because to eat to the fill was something that was very rare in that day and age. These people had just experienced that, and they were looking for their next meal. Jesus, in essence, says, I'm not going to feed you again. But he says to them, truly, truly, I say to you, in verse 26, you seek me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. These folks were spectators. They were admirers. They were takers. They were following Jesus because they wanted something from him. And it wasn't a relationship, it was food. Now Jesus sees an opportunity to preach to them. He says, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will not hunger, and he who believes in me will never thirst. So Jesus offers them something. What does he offer them? He offers them himself. Now, the question is going to be, is that enough? And we see the answer in verse 66. As a result of this, many of his disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. Here we have a case of first century fair weather fans. People who were all in when they were getting what they wanted out of the relationship. They were Jesus' biggest fan when things were going well, when they were getting what they wanted. But as soon as he stopped giving them what they wanted, they were out the door. They were ready to go somewhere else. An offer of a relationship, which was far better than any food they could receive physically, was not enough. Now, after this episode, after these people leave, I want you to notice something that we've pointed out before. Jesus doesn't seem to be that concerned about the plummeting of his popularity. Again, in this day and age, the preacher might have run after him and said, whoa, come back. Let's talk about this. I mean, numbers is what's most important. I've got this huge crowd following me. I want to make sure that I keep it. So let's negotiate here a little bit. Let's kind of talk about the terms of the deal. Jesus didn't send his disciples after them and twist their arm and say, come back, we'll work out the details. He let them leave. And after he lets them leave, he turns to his disciples. And he asked this question, "You do not want to go away also, do you?" And of all people, Peter responds with these words, "Lord, to whom shall we go?" Peter said that. Now, Peter is kind of an enigma because sometimes he was a fair weather fan, wasn't he? We know about when he denied Jesus 3 times. He wasn't all in when his life was on the line. But here, he makes a great profession of faith. Where else are we going to go, Lord? You have the words of life. Peter spoke boldly in that moment. And I want you to notice that Jesus' response to Peter, he says, "Did I myself not choose you, the 12, and yet one of you is a devil?" Now he meant Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. I don't know about you, but that seems a little bit out of place. I mean, here's Peter just making this bold confession of faith, and now Jesus is responding with these words, "Did I myself not choose you?" He's talking about one among them being a devil, and we know who he's talking about, even if it didn't include Judas Iscariot's name there. But you see, Jesus knew he had a fair weather fan even among his closest followers. He knew that Judas was going to be all in until his loyalty became divided, until he had a decision to make, whether to follow the path of righteousness and to follow after Jesus, or to follow after his hunger for money. A decision he would later regret, but a decision he made nonetheless. Judas was all in until there became a conflict of loyalty. And Jesus said, you cannot serve 2 masters. You cannot serve both God and wealth. That's Matthew 6:24. In the end, Judas would choose to serve wealth. My friends, to be a dedicated disciple requires fierce loyalty. You cannot serve 2 masters. You can only serve one. Jesus cannot be a part of your life where you serve Him for a while and then serve other things at the same time. He must be the only one that you are serving. He must be your one and only. That's why I had Spencer read from the first commandment a moment ago. God says, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You are to have no other gods before me. God demanded fierce loyalty from His followers because He had fierce loyalty to them. But you know, there is another category that closely resembles fair weather fans, and those are enthusiastic admirers. We might just call them enthusiasts. An enthusiast is someone who has a lot of enthusiasm for Christ. They have a lot to say about Him and about their relationship. They might even be referred to as a fanatic, but they still fall well short of a true follower. An enthusiast would be like the lady many years ago who told me, I just love Jesus. And I said, that's fantastic. I love Him so much, and I've dedicated my life to Him. But she was never at church. She always found other things to do on Sunday. She always found excuses not to be there. It's not about saying how much you love Jesus. It's not about waving the flag and cheering for Him. It's a matter of what we've talked about so far in this series. Commitment, sacrifice. Are you all in, even when being all in is difficult? You see, an enthusiast sits safely in the stands and cheers, but knows nothing about the pain and sacrifice that the players on the field are giving. It would be like those church members who sit on the sidelines, who cheer wildly, but they don't want to get involved in the game. They simply want to stand at a distance. Maybe they want to follow Jesus, but they want to do so from afar. They don't want to get too close because something might be required of them. They may be asked to do something, and they don't want to get that involved. They don't want their life disrupted too much. They just want to be an enthusiast. Remember Jesus' words that we have talked about several times in this series. Luke 9:23 and 24. If anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. Being a true follower takes commitment, it takes sacrifice. You cannot sit on the sidelines. You cannot stay in the stands and consider yourself a true follower. And remember, Jesus is not concerned about the size of the crowd or just fans or enthusiasts. He's concerned about who is truly following him. He wants finishers. You see, an enthusiast admires Jesus but doesn't truly know Jesus. An enthusiast may feel that he is doing everything right. He may feel that his level of commitment is deep enough. He's going above and beyond others, and so therefore that's enough. And as we talked about at our retreat this weekend, Steve made a great comment. He said, my dad always taught me not to compare, because you will always find people you're better than, and that brings about pride. And you'll always find people you're not as good as, and that brings about envy. So nothing good comes out of comparing, and that's true. We can't suffer from comparisonitis. We have to go by the standard, which is Jesus Christ, and strive to live up to that standard. But the enthusiast is fine and good with just being okay. They're fine and good with following at a distance. Jill, there's a very sobering piece of Scripture that I think relates to this. It is in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 and following. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven will enter. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name cast out demons, and in your name perform many miracles. And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. You know, the first time I ever read that passage many years ago, I thought, how uncaring Jesus would be. I mean, these people were doing good things. I mean, they were doing things in his name even. But he says, depart from me, I never knew you. You know, that word know in the Greek language can mean to have a relationship with. See, it didn't matter what these people did because they didn't have a relationship with Jesus. That's what mattered. They were going about doing all these things, maybe even for selfish reasons, but they didn't have a relationship with Christ. That's where they fell short. We must know Christ and then do his will. An enthusiast operates on feeling. It's all about emotion. It's all about what they feel and not so much what they know. It's not so much going down the path of righteousness to follow Jesus. It's a warm, fuzzy feeling that they have in their heart. And don't get me wrong, faith is not void of feeling or emotion. Certainly that plays a part, but it cannot be the foundation. You know why? Because emotion is fleeting. It goes away. It runs hot and cold. And a faith that is simply based on feeling will cause one to quickly fall away when trials or hardships come. James 2:17 reads, even so, faith, if it has no works, is dead, being by itself. Faith is more than just what is felt. Faith is about doing. It's about seeking the will of God and doing that will. An enthusiast loves Jesus, but it's not an exclusive relationship. What we mentioned a moment ago, it's kind of like that girl or that guy you may have dated in high school that said, you know, I love you, but I don't really want an exclusive relationship. I'd like to date other people, which means they've already started dating other people. You know that, right? But anyway, what if Steve, Marta, came home one day and said, you know, Steve, I love you, but I love a lot of other things too. So I just want you to know, I am going to be loyal to you, but I'm going to be loyal to these other things as well. That conversation wouldn't end well. You know that. Because you can't be loyal to several different things. You can't divide your loyalties and be as dedicated as you need to be. Our fierce loyalty to God must be first and foremost in our lives. And as I've said so many times, you get God right, you get everything right. It'll be much easier to have that loyalty to your spouse, to your children, to the will of God. We must be dedicated first and foremost. Our loyalty must be to God. You know, sometimes, without even realizing it, a person allows their loyalties to be divided. They allow loyalty to other things to flood their heart. Jesus becomes just one more object among many that they try to make time for and to put forth the effort to. But I think Jesus has something to say about this as well. There's another crowd that we read about in Luke chapter 14, beginning in verse 25. Here again we have this large crowd that is gathering around Jesus. Were they simply seeking to be inspired? Were they coming to see some sort of miracle performed? Were they just intrigued? Jesus quickly draws a line in the sand. He says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Once again, Jesus doesn't seem to be all that concerned about the big crowd. You know, again, in modern day America, the preacher might be glad that everybody's following him. And I don't want to do anything to run them off. You know, I want that contribution, I want that popularity, that status, and so therefore I'm going to do whatever it takes to make them happy. And I'm certainly not going to draw a line in the sand because that's going to run people off. And I'm sure Jesus was sad when the crowds turned away from him. But that line was still distinct. It was a line of demarcation. That, look, if you want to be on this side of it with me, here's what you're going to have to do. My friends, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, but I want you to understand, I am so pleased that Oldham Lane has become a safe haven for many people, that we have had a lot of folks come our way that were previously Christians that retired to our community and moved here, some that came over from other congregations because they felt that they weren't being fed. You know, I'm so pleased with that. And I'm thankful that we have people who want to be a part of a congregation like Oldham Lane. But I want you to understand this, and I have the elders backing on this. If you come to Oldham Lane, we're not going to let you sit in the stands. We are not going to let you sit on the sidelines. We are going to draw a line and say, get to work. Get up, roll up your sleeves, and get ready to work. We want to challenge you, because if we're not challenging you to be a better disciple, then what are you here for? What are you really doing in life if you're not wanting to challenge yourself to be better every day? You're not a true follower. And you know, in the end, we talked about this weekend. In the end, if unfortunately the crowds leave and all we're left is 20, 30 folks that are on fire, true disciples, that's enough. We'll go forward. I hope you're ready to get to work. I hope you're ready to see what we can do as a congregation that is all on fire for God, that is all living out the Great Commission, that is all seeking to serve God with all of their heart, soul, mind, and strength. I hope you're ready to see what we can become when you get off the sidelines and get in the game and get involved. Story is told that back during World War II, Adolf Hitler imprisoned a German minister by the name of Martin Niemöller. And he put him in prison for 8 years. He even spent time in Dachau. And after 8 years, Hitler came to realize, you know what, it may be good if I have this man on my side. If I can persuade him to come over and be a Nazi, then that might help me in the religious world. And so Hitler sent Niemöller's friend, who had become a Nazi, to go and speak to him. And his friend comes to him while Martin is sitting in that concentration camp. And he says, Martin, why are you here? And Martin Niemöller looks at him and says, why are you not here? Now, the Bible tells us, Revelation 2:10, to be faithful unto death. You think loyalty is important to God? You'd better believe it. And I read the Scriptures, folks, and I look and I study them, and I don't see any instance where our Lord is just happy to have some people following Him that just want to admire Him and tell Him how great He is, and that be the end of it. That's not what I read. I read about a Lord that wants true and faithful followers that are willing to walk in His footsteps no matter the cost. Now, that indicts me. I'm not quite there. And I'm sure it indicts a lot of us. Are we ready to take up our cross, to deny ourselves, and to follow Him with everything we've got? Are we ready to get out of the stands and get off the sideline? We're going to challenge you, and I hope you're up for it. If you have a need this morning that we can help you with, maybe you're not a child of God, you get in the game this morning by becoming a child of God through faith, through repenting of your sins, turning your life around and deciding to walk in the footsteps of Jesus and do His will. Confess Jesus as Lord and be immersed in the waters of baptism for the remission of sins so you can walk a new creature in Christ, so you can get in the game and be a true follower. Maybe you have made that decision sometime in the past, and perhaps you are not denying yourself daily and taking up your cross and following after Him. Maybe you need the prayers and support of this church family to get back in the game, to get back on the right path, and to be a true follower. Whatever your need is, let us help you. Come now as we stand and as we sing.